They say that time heals all wounds, but I've come to realize that time doesn't really heal anything. It just buries things. It layers years of life over the pain until you forget where the ache started. For 20 years, I lived with a version of my mother that was carved out of granite. She was a woman of few words. She was the kind of mother who never hugged me without a reason, and she seemed to carry the weight of the entire world on her shoulders without ever once asking for help. When she passed away last autumn, she didn't leave behind a grand estate or a chest full of gold. She left a small, two-bedroom house on the edge of town and a lot of silence. I spent weeks cleaning out her closets, feeling like an intruder in a life I was supposed to be a part of. Every drawer I opened felt like a secret I wasn't meant to see. But then, on a Tuesday afternoon when the rain was drumming softly against the roof, I found it. It was tucked behind a loose board in the back of her old mahogany wardrobe, a simple, cream-colored envelope. It wasn't sealed with wax or hidden with a lock. It was just sitting there, covered in a thin layer of dust, waiting for the right person to find it. Or maybe it was just waiting for the only person left to read it. The handwriting on the front was unmistakable. It was my mother's, sharp, slanted, and very disciplined. It simply said, "For my daughter when the house is finally quiet." I sat down right there on the floor of that empty room. The cold wood pressed against my legs, and my hands trembled just a little as I opened it. My heart wasn't racing with excitement. I didn't expect a scandal. To be honest, I expected a list of bank accounts or maybe a final set of instructions on how to maintain her rose garden. But as I read the first 3 lines, the air left my lungs. What that letter said broke my heart into 1,000 pieces. But it wasn't for the reason you might think. It didn't reveal a secret enemy or a hidden fortune. It revealed a woman I had never actually met. It revealed a woman who had sacrificed her own soul so that I would never have to know the taste of fear. To really understand the letter, you have to understand the woman who wrote it. Growing up, my mother, Evelyn, was the definition of stoic. We lived in a small town where everyone knew everyone's business, but somehow, no one ever knew ours. We were like a little island in the middle of a busy sea. My father had passed away when I was only 3 years old. At least that was the story I was told my whole life. I had one blurry photo of him, a tall man with a kind smile, standing by an old blue car. My mother never spoke of him. Never. If I asked, even as a little girl, she would simply look at me with those gray, steady eyes and say, "He's gone, Sarah. We have work to do." And we did work. My mother worked 2 jobs for as long as I can remember. She was a seamstress by day and a night cleaner at the local hospital. I grew up with the constant sound of her sewing machine late at night. Whir, click, whir, click. It was the heartbeat of our home. It was the sound that told me we were safe, even if it was a lonely kind of safety. There was no music in our house, no loud laughter or spontaneous dancing. Everything was orderly. Everything was functional. I used to go to my friends' houses and feel so confused. I'd see their mothers cry at sad movies or burn the toast and laugh about it. My mother didn't do those things. She didn't dance. She measured. She weighed. She survived. I grew up thinking she was cold. I grew up feeling like I was just a task she had to complete, like a chore on a list, rather than a child she wanted to cherish. I was well fed, my clothes were always clean, and I stayed in school. But I felt like a guest in a library. You follow the rules, you keep the noise down, and you leave when your time is up. I remember once, when I was about 10 years old, I fell off my bike and scraped my knee badly. I ran to her in the kitchen, crying, expecting a long hug and some sweet words. She looked at the wound, her face completely expressionless. She cleaned it with stinging antiseptic and put on a bandage. "It's just a scratch," she said. "Crying won't make the skin grow back faster, Sarah. Go finish your homework." I hated her in that moment. I spent my teenage years building a wall of my own. If she wouldn't show me emotion, I wouldn't show her my life. We lived under the same roof for 18 years as 2 strangers sharing a silent agreement. We were roommates who happened to share the same DNA. When I left for college, I didn't look back. I didn't cry when the car pulled away. I moved 3 states away, and I only called on Sundays at 4:00 p.m. The conversations were always the same. It was like reading from a script. "How is the weather there, Sarah?" she would ask. "It's fine, Mom. A bit of rain today. How are you?" "The garden is doing well. I fixed the leak in the roof last Monday." "That's good. I have to go study now." "All right, take care of yourself." There was so much I wanted to say during those calls. I wanted to ask her why she never married again. I wanted to ask if she ever missed my father or if she ever felt lonely in that big, quiet house. But the silence she had cultivated for years was too thick to pierce. I was afraid that if I asked a real question, the whole world we had built would come crashing down. Years turned into decades. I got married to a kind man named Mark. I had a son, Leo. I invited my mother to the wedding, of course. She came, dressed in a sensible navy blue suit. She sat in the front row, her face unmoving. When she hugged me in the receiving line, she felt like a statue. Later that night, Mark whispered to me, "Your mom is intense. It's like she's constantly on guard, looking for an exit." I just nodded. I told him she was just a bitter woman who had let life's hardships turn her to stone. I believed that with every fiber of my being. The last time I saw her alive was 2 years ago. I had brought Leo to visit. He was 5 at the time, a whirlwind of energy and noise. He was running through the living room and accidentally knocked over one of her ceramic vases. It was a cheap thing, something she'd had since I was a baby. I braced myself. I expected her to snap. I expected the long lecture on being careful and respecting property. But she just stood there, looking at the broken pieces on the rug. She didn't say a word. She just picked up the broom and swept them away. When she looked at Leo for a split second, just a heartbeat, I saw her lip tremble. I saw a flash of something that looked like pure raw agony. But then, as quickly as it appeared, the mask was back. "It's just glass," she whispered. I left that weekend feeling more distant than ever. I told Mark on the drive home, "I don't think she loves us. I think she just endures us. I think she's forgotten how to feel anything at all." But as I sat on that dusty floor in the attic, holding her letter, I realized how wrong I had been. The paper felt heavy in my hands. The ink was faded in some spots, as if she had written it over a long period of time. "My dearest Sarah," it began, "I know you think I am a cold woman. I know you think I didn't have room in my heart for your tears. Please, if you can, forgive me. I had to be cold so that you could stay warm. I had to be a fortress so that no one could get to you." I stopped reading for a moment, my heart thumping against my ribs. I kept going. She went on to explain the truth about my father. He hadn't died in a car accident. He wasn't the kind man in the photo. My father was a man of great charm, but he had a darkness in him that most people never saw. He was a man who lived in the shadows of the law, and he viewed people, especially his wife and child, as property. When she tried to leave him when I was just a toddler, he told her that if she ever walked away, he would make sure she never saw me again. He told her he would disappear with me, and she would spend the rest of her life wondering where I was. He had the connections to do it. The letter described a night I don't remember at all, a night in the middle of a winter storm. She had waited until he was asleep, grabbed a diaper bag and the few clothes she could fit into a sack, and she ran. She didn't just leave the house, she disappeared from her entire life. She changed her name. She changed mine. She moved to a town where she knew no one, took jobs that paid in cash, and lived in constant, paralyzing terror that he would find us. Every time a car slowed down in front of our house, she thought it was him. Every time a stranger asked for directions, she thought they were sent by him. Every time the phone rang and the person on the other end hung up, she felt her heart stop. "I couldn't be the mother who played games or laughed loudly," she wrote. "I couldn't let my guard down for a single second, Sarah. I thought that if I showed any emotion, if I became soft, I would lose my edge. And if I lost my edge, I wouldn't see the danger coming. I didn't want you to grow up afraid. I didn't want you to look over your shoulder every time you walked to school. So I took all the fear into myself. I became the stone wall so you could play in the garden behind it." She explained that she worked those 2 jobs not just to survive, but to pay a private investigator in another city to keep track of my father, to make sure he stayed far away from our zip code. She lived her entire life as a fugitive, hiding in plain sight, so that I could live mine as a normal, happy girl. The most painful part was near the end of the second page. When Leo broke that vase, I wanted to cry. Not for the vase, but because he was so free. He wasn't afraid of making a mistake. He didn't look at me with fear. "I looked at you in that moment and I saw that you were a good mother, gentle and kind. I knew then that I had succeeded. You weren't like me. You were happy. That was my only goal in this life. Even if it meant you would never love the woman I had to become to keep you safe." The paper was damp with my tears by the time I reached the final paragraph. I looked around that empty, quiet attic, and for the first time in my life, the house didn't feel cold. It felt like a shield. It felt like a sanctuary. Every silent dinner I had resented, every time she told me not to cry, every measured, careful response she ever gave me, it wasn't a lack of love. It was the highest, purest form of love I have ever encountered. She had sacrificed her personality. She had sacrificed her joy. She had sacrificed her very identity to ensure mine was protected. She took the blows of the world on her back so that I would never even feel the wind. I realized then that my stoic mother was the bravest person I would ever know. She carried that heavy secret for 40 years, never once asking for credit, never once playing the victim, and never once letting me see her bleed. She let me believe she was the villain of my childhood so that I would never have to know who the real villain was. She traded my affection for my safety, and she did it without hesitation. I spent the next few days in a daze. I walked through the rooms of the house, touching the walls, looking at the furniture. I went out to the garden she loved so much. She had spent so many hours tending to those flowers, pulling weeds, making sure everything was perfect. Now I finally understood why. In a world of chaos and fear, those flowers were something she could actually control. They were something she could make beautiful and keep safe. I called Mark and I told him everything. We sat on the phone in silence for a long time, both of us crying. I told him I wanted to bring Leo back to the house one last time before we sold it. I wanted my son to know that this place wasn't just his grandmother's house, it was a fortress built of love. I went to her grave that Sunday. It was a simple headstone, just like she wanted. I didn't bring roses. Instead, I found a small, smooth stone in the garden. I held it in my hand for a long time, feeling its weight. I placed it on the top of the headstone and I whispered, "You can rest now, Mom. The house is quiet, I am safe, and I finally know who you are." We often judge people by what they show us, don't we? We look at the surface and we think we know the whole story. We forget that what people hide is usually much more important than what they reveal. We see the closed doors and the quiet faces, and we assume there is nothing inside. But sometimes, a person is quiet because they are busy holding the roof up so it doesn't fall on your head. My mother's life taught me that love isn't always a hug or a sweet word at bedtime. Sometimes, love is a sacrifice that no one ever sees. It's the choice to be strong when you want to crumble into a million pieces. It's the choice to be misunderstood and even disliked so that someone else can grow up happy and whole. If you have someone in your life who seems distant or hard to reach or maybe even a little bit cold, don't walk away just yet. You never know what storms they're keeping at bay for you. You never know what letters are waiting to be found in the quiet corners of their heart. I miss my mother every single day. But I don't miss the cold woman I thought she was anymore. I miss the hero I finally discovered. I am her daughter, and because of her, I can live my life with a heart that is open, loud, and full of love. I don't have to be a fortress because she already was one for me. The house is quiet now. The sewing machine is still. But for the first time in my life, I am not alone in the silence. I am surrounded by her love.